Hey guys, welcome back to the stream. I'm gonna wait for a few of you guys to get in here before I start. Though admittedly I'm not sure how many people are going to come, considering this is basically a restream. And so the rationale for doing a restream here is mainly because yesterday was kind of a mess and I didn't really want to post it to the channel. So we'll redo it and we'll do it properly this time. Hi there, Dairon? Am I saying that right? I hope I am. I'm sure I butchered your name though. Alright, so let's see. Just updating to see how many people are in here. Got about 5 viewers. That should be enough. Alright, he says yeah, so apparently I did not butcher your name too badly, which is good. Alright, so we'll get started here. I've got the app running. Hey, Allison. I've got the app running here. If you didn't see last night's stream, I'm just going to go over the stuff that I changed between the second stream and this stream. It's mainly just CSS stuff. I added the login button, push everything over to the right here. And yeah, so you can sign up and enter the rooms still. Of course, you need to be signed in to enter rooms. We all did that in the second video. So the plan here is to make it so that when we go into a room, we are in a WebSocket, or rather a Phoenix channel, and then all the users in that room can talk to one another via the WebSocket in real time. And of course, we want to add some features like presence, so we want to make it so that users can see when other users are typing, and they can see who else is inside of the chat room. And we also want to make it so that the messages are persistent. And we'll do all that in today's stream. Oh wow, got quite a few people. Hey everybody, how you doing? So I guess we'll get started then with the code. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to, as always, shoot them over and I'll check the chat periodically and try and answer them as best as I can. Alrighty, so get started here. We essentially want to set up our channel, and for this we're mainly going to be messing around with the JavaScript and the Elixir side of things. So let's start with the JavaScript because that's probably the easiest part of it. So we're going to be dealing with these two files, app.js and socket.js. Let's see, make sure that we have socket imported inside of app.js, otherwise it will not run. But inside of socket.js we have all this stuff here. And I'm actually going to remove all of these comments in between these lines so that you guys can read what's going on here a little bit easier. So we're importing socket from the Phoenix JavaScript library. They're creating a new socket, and on the socket route, we're connecting to the socket, and then we're connecting specifically to a channel called topic subtopic. And then we've got these two little receivers, one for if we join successfully and one for if we join with an error. Now, for our purposes, we want to change this string here so that we can pattern match on it inside of our channel logic. And for now, we'll just make it room general. That way, everybody who joins a room will be inside of this particular topic for now. And then we'll make it so that each channel has their own specific topic a little bit later. So after we've done that, we can just go ahead and jump into the Elixir code. So over in channels, we want to create a new file. Call this room channel, socket.ex. Find it. As chat app web room channel, and we also want to give it some behavior. So let's see, we'll say use chat app web, and the behavior is channel. All right, so for this we essentially want to create a join function, but we also need to connect it to this user socket.ex file, which also already has a piece here that's commented out, which is connected to our room channel. So we can just uncomment this, and it will then pattern match on that string that we put in, the room general string, and then point it towards the room channel file that we just created. So now that we've done that, we can create the join function, and join is going to take in 3 arguments: the channel name, the parameters, and then the socket itself. And we essentially just want to say okay, as the users join the channel, and then we'll take that channel name and we'll put it into a map so that we can serve it back to our JavaScript side, and then we'll just add the socket in this tuple. So this callback gets called when we join the channel, and let's see. If we go and we check out our application, and we say log in and sign up, let's see, I don't even know if I have anything in the database, but let's give it a shot. Alright, so log in, enter one of the rooms, check out the console. It should say here, yeah, successfully joined. Then we get our object, the channel with the topic name, which is just room general. So that's the join function executing and sending it back to our JavaScript layer. All right, so this is all fine and dandy. We're connected to our WebSocket, and no matter which channel we join currently, we're always going to get room general, which is fine for now. But of course, we want to make it so that the users have a form so that they can pass around messages to one another inside of these channels. So let's go modify our template. So specifically, we're going to modify the show template for our room controller, because that's the main page that we've been looking at. So let's create a unordered list. This will be like our chat display list, essentially. So all the messages will be inside of this. We want it to have an ID. I'm just going to call it display. And then let's do a form. And this form, let's just give it the message or a ID, because we're going to need to query select it, of message form. And it doesn't need an action. In the form, though, we do want to create an input box. So input, this will be type text, and we'll give it an ID of message body, because when we submit this, we'll be submitting the message body. We'll give it a placeholder as well, and we can use some embedded Elixir here. So input message for, and then we can get the room name from our signs map. So at room.name, like this, and I'm using $signs. It shouldn't be $signs. And yeah, so that should show up in the placeholder text. And then let's see, below this we'll have a div, and in the div we'll have our button. And, sorry, I'm trying to remember some of these Bootstrap names, but some of them I don't remember. This should also have an ID. Let's just call it message button, and yeah, we'll say send on the button. Now, of course, I didn't go back to the code. That's all right. It seems to be showing up in the browser as I'm doing it, which is fine. So you guys are seeing the result of all this. I'll flip back to the editor and I'll go through it again. So this is what I did. Made a UL, unordered list, gave it some Bootstrap classes, gave it an ID of display, made a form, gave it an ID of message form, then put an input inside of it, ID of message body, and then a div and a button inside of that with message button as its ID. So it's fairly straightforward. Let's see. Yeah, sorry guys. I do that frequently, apparently. I'll try to not do that again. All right, so now that we've created this HTML, we can go ahead and create a query selector and a event listener and find out when the user is submitting the form, because that's important to us, because when the user submits the form, obviously they want to submit a message to the channel. So we want to go back to our socket.js file, and we'll come in here and we'll just create a document.query selector, and we want to select the form. We called the form message form, so let's just grab that. So query selector on message form, and then we'll just say add event listener, and the event listener is on submission, so submit. This takes the event, which we'll call E, and we'll execute this callback with the event. So first we want to prevent any kind of default behavior, so we can do that by calling prevent default, and then we can just say input equals e.target.query selector, and for this we want to grab the input box, which we called, I believe, message dash body, but I just want to check. Yeah, message body. So we'll grab that. And then we need to pass it back to our Elixir code, and we can do this via the channel. So we can call channel push, and we're going to say, all right, when we pass in a message, we're passing in message add as our channel topic. So this is something that we can pattern match on, and then this will have the message inside of it. We'll just say message, and we'll just say input dot value is our message, and of course we want to clear this input value afterwards, so just grab that, set it equal to an empty string like that. All right, so now let me show you guys this really quick. If we go back to our application and I type something in, a test, obviously we're not going to see anything happen on our screen, but if we go to our terminal, and for some reason the terminal, there we go, yeah, terminal, you can actually see, where is it? Should be here somewhere. Yeah, message add, message test right here. So this is the event that's being passed into our channel, and obviously we're getting an error because we don't have a handler for this. So we want to build that handler now. All right, so let's go into the Elixir code, the room channel specifically, and let's create that handler. The handler is going to be called handle in. By the way, this channel is essentially just a gen server with some specific behavior built on top of it. And like with the gen server, you have things like handle info, handle cast, handle, you know, all of the normal gen server functions, but you also have this handle in function, which is specifically for when you get events from some kind of client, in this case from our JavaScript. So we're looking for the event message add, and we want to get that message out of the parameters. So we'll say message and just call this the body of the message. And then we have this socket coming in here as well. So we have a nice little helper function here called broadcast, which will take and broadcast a new event to every other client that's connected to this socket. So we can say broadcast to the socket. We'll pass in a new event. And we'll call this, let's see, we'll just say room general new message like this. And then we can pass in the message that we want to pass along with the event. And we'll just say body like that. So we'll pass up essentially a object to the JavaScript that we can then unwrap and do stuff with. And this is synchronous, or yeah, it's synchronous. So we want to pass back a reply of OK, and then pass back the socket as well. And now let's go back to our JavaScript so that we can handle this new event. So we can go ahead and create a channel handler, and I'm actually going to put it up here so that we have organization by going channel on, and we can put in the event here. You can see it says event string. The event was room general new message. And then we have a callback that will execute when this event occurs, and the callback is getting our message, and we essentially just want to console log that message so we can see it actually being sent back to our JavaScript. Alright, so go into our browser here, open up our DevTools. Of course, we get joined room general, and then if I type in test, we now get object with body test inside of it. So that means that we can very easily use this object to render a message on our HTML screen. So in fact, we'll create a function here called display message. I'll create it down here. So const display message. Let's take in a message, and we're essentially just going to, let's say template equals a list element, give it a class, and inside of it we'll put in our message.body, which is the field that we're passing through. And then we can use a query selector to grab the display, which is our unordered list here. So grab that, and then we can append it to this unordered list. So query selector ID display, and we want to say inner HTML plus equals this new template. So every time a message goes through, we'll call display message with message inside of it, and then it will append this to our query, or to that piece of HTML. Alrighty, so this should work. Let's see. So type in test, and indeed we do get a box above. So, and there we go. So yes, now we're able to add these messages to our code. The issue here though is that no matter which room we're inside of, we will still get the same messages. And actually, let me show this to you guys. So let me open up a new window here, and I'll log in with another user. Hang on, let me pull up the little browser thing I made a second ago. Alright. So let's get two users going. I don't know if I have a second user in here, so let's sign up. should be all right. All right, so we got him signed in. This guy will go in general, and the other one's in Elixir. So now if I type in a message, so like hi, you can see that it's actually appearing in Elixir and as well as in general. And I can do the same from Elixir to general. So no matter which room we're inside of, we're always going to see the same conversation. So we need to make it so that our channels differentiate between these two, the different rooms, so that we can add infinite rooms and then have infinite channels attached to them. Am I going to use a gen server to manage the chat rooms? No, I'm not, because the channel itself is a gen server. I don't really need to build a specific one or like an agent or anything like that. I'm going to use Ecto instead. It does, but you could add Emery, I think I'm saying that right. He says using inner HTML to modify HTML element user input, doesn't that make your app susceptible to script injection? It does, but you could use sanitization. I'm obviously not going to go into that because this is not really about JavaScript so much as it's just about the Elixir stuff. I mean, obviously, if you're going to build an app, if you're going to be manipulating HTML at any given point with JavaScript, you should probably sanitize the input no matter what you're doing, no matter how you're adding it to your HTML. In my case, I'm not going to go through those processes right now. All right, so let's go back into the code and make it so that we have multiple rooms here. All right, so this is actually not too difficult. It's just a matter of passing from our normal HTTP connection the assignment map, the room ID, to our sockets assignment map, it's room ID. And we can do this via our layout. So if we come into the layout here, or actually I want to do this in show. So we'll do it in show. We'll make a script tag, and we'll just basically add the room ID to our window object, the JavaScript window object. We'll call it room ID like this. And then we can set it equal to a bit of embedded Elixir, which just uses the assignments map. So get room.id, and yeah, that'll pass it back to our JavaScript. Yes. I need to close this. And yeah, and now we can access this in the JavaScript and then pass it to our sockets assignment map rather. So now that we have this, we go back to socket here. We can come up to the top and we can say let room ID equal window.room ID. So that gives us what we just added, and then we can add it here where we have general. We can just use string interpolation, and for this we're going to have to use backticks. So you can just say like this, room ID. So now when we join a room, it will join that room and then the room ID. So this will differentiate each of the rooms. And we also want to do the same thing down here. Let's go ahead and place this with backticks. That way when a message is sent, it's not just sent to the general room, it's sent to the specific room's ID. And I don't think we have any other instances of this going on. So let's save that. We also want to make it so that the user doesn't connect to the socket, or to the channel rather, unless they are in a room. So we can say if room ID, and then we can wrap all of our code, all of this code here, inside of this if statement. So essentially, if you're not in the room, it won't try to connect you to the socket. But if you are in the room, then it will. Excuse me. All right. So now inside of our Elixir code, it's just a matter of using pattern matching to get that room ID. So essentially our room would look something like this. It'd be like room 1 if the ID was like 1 or 2 or whatever the ID is. And so we just want to pattern match on that string with the join channel name. So the channel name will be room, and then it'll be concatenated with the room ID like this. So then with the channel name that we're passing back, we can change that as well. We can go ahead and just use some string interpolation like this and just pass in the room ID. And then let's see, for message add, oh yes, and then we want to of course add this to our assignment map, and we can do that down here where we're passing back the socket. We can call assign, pass in the socket, pass in the key that we want to assign it to. So we'll assign it to room ID like this, and then we'll pass in the value. So room ID like that. And then inside of this handle in callback, we can go and get the room ID by just saying room ID equals socket.assigns, and we can specifically reference the room ID key in this map. So now we've got the room ID, and we can change this from general to room ID like that. And this should, in theory, fix our issue. Let's go back to our 2 boxes. So both of these users are in different chat rooms. If I type in something like hi, well, it's not going to either chat room. Let's find out why. Alright, so let me show you guys the terminal. So we're getting the message, saying here message, and it's being handled on room 2. All of that seems to be alright. The issue probably is that we need to reload these rooms so that they properly connect to the WebSockets. Or perhaps not. Okay, let me kind of do some debugging here and check and see what could potentially be going wrong. Let me take you guys back to the editor so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, so room ID, all that's fine. Socket assigns, room ID, it's fine. Socket assigns, fine. Room ID, new message. I think this is the issue here, probably with the JavaScript. Let's check to see. Maybe I didn't save it or something. Let me check again. Let me see if the JavaScript is throwing an error. No, it doesn't seem to be. But it doesn't seem to be handling the message new event. At least I don't see where it's handling that event. So let's see. Alright, so room ID, new message event. It's fine in the JavaScript. What about down here? Room ID, new message. Am I missing like a colon or something? Let me just grab this. Excuse me. Message add seems to be alright. Alright, I really think it's just this. I mean, all that looks fine to me. Just sure. I'm going to restart the server. Alright. Then I'll reconnect to the WebSockets. All right, so what are we seeing here? I'm not seeing it. So handled message add incoming on room 1, blah, 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 blah. All right, let's just keep going, and then I'll find out the error as we keep going, I'm sure. So we want to authenticate the user per socket as well, so that we can add that user to the message that we're sending into the message that we're sending on the screen. So when the message appears, we want to say like Tensor sent hi, or whatever. So for this, we can go into our app.html.eax, create another script tag, and use this to pass yet another item to our window. Specifically, we want the user token variable to be populated with something. And we'll use some embedded Elixir for this. And we're going to populate it with signs user token, which is something that we can add to, and in fact, let me put this above this here. And we'll add the user token to one of our plugs, and we can add it to our assignment map in this way. So go to the plugs. In set user, we're adding a bunch of variables to the assignment map. So we can go ahead and just assign a token here. So this will be user token, like that. And of course, we need to get the token. The token is literally just a encrypted version of the user's ID. And in this app, our user's IDs are just integers. We can use a built-in module called Phoenix token and a built-in function called sign to encrypt the token. So we'll sign the token on the context of the connection, and we'll sign it with the salt of user token. So this string is our salt, and then the user ID is what we're going to be converting into the token. So that's what we're encrypting. And so that's now in our assignment map. We can then, of course, now use it in our JavaScript. And in fact, by default, the socket here is going and getting the Windows user's token. And prior to the little piece of code that we just wrote, this variable in our JavaScript was empty. So now it shouldn't be empty, at least in theory. All right, so let me show you guys this. If we go to the browser and we go into our terminal, we can go ahead and go window.userToken, and this will get our encrypted token for the user ID. And you can see here it's just a bunch of random stuff. And so this is just for, and I think Tensor is just user 1 in this case. So we literally took the integer 1 and we turned it into this giant string. So now we want to reconvert it back to the integer so that we can then use it in our socket. And we can do that inside of this user socket file. And we'll do it via this connect function. The connect function is the function that gets executed when the user connects to the channel. And yeah, so we'll create a new head for this connect function. And in fact, we'll have two new heads. So connect, this one will take in the token like this, and then the socket and the connection info. And yeah, all right, so we'll get the token, and then we can say phoenix.token.verify, and we'll verify on the socket context. We'll put in our salt, which is just user token, and then we'll pass in the token. We also want to make it so that the token will expire after a day. So I'm going to create a max age constant, which will be 24 times 60 times 60. This is in seconds. So 24 hours times 60 minutes times 60 seconds. And then we can put in here a max age option, and then put in our max age constant. So this token will then it will become invalid after a day, and then it will have to re-sign the token, or rather recheck the token when the user tries to connect back to the socket. So if we get OK and then the user ID, then we'll just call OK, and we want to then put the user ID into the assigns map of our socket. So current user ID like this. And then if we get an error, and the reason, we don't really care about the reason, but we do want to pass back an error. We also want to expand this other connect function, just make it so that it will throw back an error. That way, if we don't have a token associated with the user, then they can't connect to the WebSocket. All right. So that should be all good. So now let's go back to our room channel. And now since we're using the user, we can go ahead and get the username. So let me alias our chat app repo, and then the accounts user, so that we can go ahead and get it from the repository. I'm going to create a function here called get user while we're at it, and this will actually take in the socket, and we'll just call repo user repo.get, pass in the user struct, and we'll pass in socket assigns current user ID. So we pass in the user ID to get the user from the repository, and then of course this will return back to whatever we're calling it from, and we're going to call it in this handle in function so that we can get the user, and we'll just say user equals get user socket like that. And we can now expand this message that we're passing in here. Let's go ahead and say message equals, and we'll have our body, which is still the body that we're being passed in here, but we also want to now add the user with the user ID and the username, or just the username. So we'll have user, and then we'll have username, and we'll pass in user.username like that. And now we can just take this message and put it in here instead of the other map, and yeah. So now that will broadcast the message with the username and the user content, and we can of course add it to our JavaScript. All right, so this did not resolve the error, of course, but that's all right. Let's keep going. So go into our JavaScript socket.js, and we'll add this to our display message function. So display message, currently getting the message body. We also want to, of course, add the message username. So let's put this inside of a strong. Just say msg.user.username, so that we can get that. And this should be a $. And then we'll put a colon here and a space. Let me just bring this up here. All right, so that's what each of our messages will look like. And I just want to check something, so I'm going to console log display message, see if this is even executing. because I think that's probably not happening when we pass in a message. Yeah, it's not. So, alright. So I'm going to go through here there line by line real quick, make sure it's working. In fact, check to see that the room ID is coming through. So the room ID is in fact coming through. Room ID, if room ID channel, socket connect, blah, 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 join. It's fine. Channel on, room ID, new message. Yes, yes. Still not seeing where the error is. Still don't know why it's not working. Should be though. Yes, the code will be posted to GitHub. Let's see. In fact, the code that we started with is already in the GitHub in the description of this stream. You can go ahead and check it out, but once I'm finished with this code, I'll also update that GitHub repository. All right, so let me go through this once more. That's kind of a pain. All right, so let me just check. If I just convert this back to general, does it still work? Let's see. It's of course going to complain, but that's all right. So it does in fact work. Let me show you guys this. So we change it back to general. You can see here that when I typed a message, it now says Tensor and then the message. So that's all working. It seems to be working fine. The issue is, of course, the room ID. Apparently that's not coming through properly. So let's see. The assign map should be fine. Everything there should be all right. Let's, I'm going to inspect the room ID to make sure that we're getting the proper one. All right, and for this I need to have the user rejoin the room. And yes, I do indeed get the proper room ID when the user rejoins. Oh, you know what it is? Huh. I'm silly me. I think I completely missed this step. So the issue is I'm just rushing too fast. No. I'm wrong. Alright, so it should still be room ID. This is all fine. I did forget the colon. That's the problem. Alright, yes. And I even mentioned that before, I think. I probably forgot a colon. And for some reason I didn't think to check there. So let's fix all this, put all this back how it should be. So pass in the room ID so that we have our independent rooms. And go ahead and fix the JavaScript as well. And just do it like that. And yes, of course, now this works properly. So yes, it was just a problem, another typo. You can see here now I'm in general, and I can type in general. And then if I pull up my side-by-side browsers, let's see, like this, you can see that the messages, yeah, they're going across because both are in general. If I move one of them to, say, Elixir, start typing in here, you can see that the messages are not going to both of the different rooms. So each of the rooms has its own channel, which is nice and is exactly what we're trying to do here. All right, so that's settled. And another silly error, but not as bad as last night, which I'm glad. And Freak caught it. He said it's missing a colon when you're pattern matching on it, line 7 of the room module. Thank you. I should have looked at the question, but it's all right. Okay, so let's continue. We want to now add some presence to our application. So we've got basic chat functionality. Presence gives us a lot of cool functionality. It allows us to essentially check to see how many users are in our chat rooms. It also allows us to do things like, for instance, find out when a user is like typing or when a user's like AFK, or we could do things like add statuses, like the user could say that they're online, offline, or away or something like that. And then we could attach it to the presence metadata. So for this, we want to go ahead and use our command line tool to generate a new presence module. I could, of course, just put it in manually, but might as well use the Phoenix generation tools for this. So Phoenix gen presence, and this will go ahead and create that new file here called presence inside of our channels folder. And we're going to need to also add this here to our application.ex file so that everything runs properly. And we'll need to do that before we go ahead and rerun the server. So we come to chat app applications. This is our process tree essentially, and we want to add the presence process so that it will be supervised. So once we do that, we can go ahead and restart the server. And yeah, now we can start to implement presence. So if we come into the presence module, we can actually see some of what it gives us. Presence gives us these maps, and the maps have like the user ID or whatever ID that we're attaching the presence to, and then it has a bunch of metadata inside of it. It actually looks like this. So you have like metadatas, metas, and then like the status of away, and then a Phoenix ref for each one. And then each user has its own associated map. And we can use presence to go ahead and get the data and also set the data in these meta maps. So we've got presence in here. Let's make it so that we show the users as they're online. So I'm going to go to our room channel. And because our channel is essentially just a gen server, we can say send self. So we're sending a message to this process from this process, and the message will be after join. So after the user joins, we'll fire off another callback, and the callback will be handle info, not handle in. Handle in is for any callbacks that come from a client. Handle info is for any callbacks that are sent in a way that isn't recognized by gen server as part of the pattern. So just the normal send function is something that we would have to handle with handle info. So we want to pattern match on after join like this, and put in a socket like that, and we can then push to the socket the presence state, and we'll use presence.list on the socket. And what this does is it essentially makes that metadata list for our socket. So we can then just say user equals get user, get the user from the socket, and then we'll use some pattern matching here. We'll use a tuple of OK and then underscore because we don't need the second argument. Let's say presence.track. We want to track the socket. We specifically want to track each of our users, and we'll track them with the user.id. And we're going to attach some data to these users. We want to attach the user ID and then the username, like that. So this is going to be attached to our metas map. So this is also asynchronous. So by the way, this should be user.username. This is asynchronous, so we'll pass back no reply, not reply. What's the issue here? All right, I didn't alias the presence. So I need to alias the presence module that we created so this will work properly. So now that we have this handle info function, we can go to our JavaScript and manipulate the present state that we're creating when the user joins the socket. And in fact, the data would look something like this. So, I mean, I already kind of showed you what it would look like, but it would look something like this. User, let's say it's user 1, so user followed by the ID, and then there'd be another object inside of that with metas, and then metas has a list of objects associated with it. In our case, metas would just have the username of the user. Let's say it's Tensor, and then the user ID, which in this case would be 1, because we already wrote it up here, and then it would have a phx ref field, which is just a bit of data that's essentially referencing where this data is coming from. And then we would have another one for the next user. So if there was like a second user here, we'd have another map like this. And so we can manipulate this bit of JSON inside of our Java script. So before we do that though, let's go ahead and expand our show template so that we can actually put the users inside of a box on the side of the screen. So I'm going to put this here, div, let's give it column md3, and in fact, let's see, put this here, and I want to wrap this one in a row. I'm going to wrap everything in a div row, and then I'll put this one in div column md9. So the form and everything will be wrapped like that, and then we'll have this next to it. And I'll beautify this file in a moment so that you can actually see what I'm doing here. So then we'll have a div card, and we'll have a div card header. Something like that should be fine. And we'll say users online, colon. Then after this, we'll have our div card body, and then a div with an ID of users online, so that we can select that and then populate it with our users. All right, let's see. How does this look? It looks decent. Let me show you guys. I'll probably clean it up a bit, but yeah. So now we have this box on the side, and the box will have each of the users inside of the chat room inside of it. And if we add messages, yes. All right, so they stay on the left, and this doesn't mess up. I'll probably clean it up a bit after this tutorial, but yeah, we're not really focusing on CSS and Bootstrap and stuff like that. We're focusing on the Elixir. All right, so let's go into Socket.js. We want to import presence, the presence module from the Phoenix.js module. And we also want to create a variable here called presences, which will just be an empty object for now. And we're going to use this as essentially the state for our presences. And there are two events that we're going to be listening on for our presences. We want to have presence state, which will pass back the state, and then we want to have presence diff, which is when the state changes in any way. So state is when a user joins the chat, they get the entire state that's currently there. And then the diff is when a user's already inside of the room and say somebody leaves, then the state will change, and we only really need to change the fact that that one person left. So for both of these, we'll say presences. For this one, we'll actually say presence.sync state. We have these two functions, so sync state and sync diff. just do it like that. And in this other one, we can call sync diff instead. Pass in our diff. And then we want to create a function to actually render the users. So we'll call it display users. And we'll pass in our presences. And we'll do this on both of these listeners. So now let's create that function. So this will take in presences. And what we can kind of do is use like pseudo pattern matching. So users online equal presence dot list, should be presence dot list, not presences. Pass in our presences, and we're going to pattern match on the big old map that I was talking about. Specifically, we're looking for the metas, and inside of the metas, we're going to have the user, and then we're going to have a bunch of other pieces. So we specifically want to get the user, and then we can use the destruct spread operator to just take the rest and put it in this rest variable. So for each of the users, we can then call a callback function in here, which will generate our a template for that user. And in fact, afterwards we'll call join so that we can connect all these strings together. And in here, what we'll do is we'll just return the template that we want to create. I'll create a div with an ID of user ID. And inside of it, we'll put in the username. So let me put this in a strong. And we'll do it like that. And yeah, that looks fine to me. I guess we could add a class here. Text secondary, like that. And let's see. All right, so let's see, user IDs, user blah 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 blah. All right, we need our query selector too, so that we can then add it to the HTML. So document dot query selector, and I forget what we called it. What are we, users online, something like that. Let me check. Yeah, users online. Let me just make sure I'm spelling it properly. Yes, I would have forgotten the S if I didn't do that. All right, so we'll use inner HTML again. I know you're not really fond of that one, but in this case, we're not actually, these are not coming from an input box, so the user, or there's no way that they're going to be able to just inject some script into here. And actually this needs to be inside of our function call. And now, if we go back to our, oh geez. Of course, I did all of this while you guys were watching the app. Silly me. Well, you guys saw the product of this code. Ah, Jesus. Sorry guys, that was a big blunder on my part. Alright, well, I'll go back through all this. I didn't even realize I was doing that. Alright, well, I mean, you've seen the product now. I mean, it actually works. How far back do I have to go? One of you guys answer me. How much did you not see? All the way at the beginning of adding presence, or all the way at the beginning of implementing the present state, presence diff stuff? All right, well, whatever. We'll go all the way back. So we in our join function, we added this send self after join. So we're sending a message to this process, and then we're calling handle info to handle that message. And we're pushing the presence state with the presence list onto the socket to create the presences. And then we're getting the user from our socket, the socket assigns. Then we're calling presence track with the socket, putting in the user ID, and then we're creating our presence map. And then, because this is no non-blocking, we pass back no reply socket like that. And then this creates our presence map, which will be like essentially just a JSON map that looks like this, where we have like the user ID, and then this would be metas, and it'd be a list of objects. In our case, the objects will have both the user ID and then the username. So in this case, it'd be like ID and then the username. And we'll just say user. And then, yeah, this would repeat over and over again. So we can then access this from our JavaScript and then use it to show all of this into the actual editor. So then I went into the show file and I added this stuff. Let me actually beautify this so it actually looks better. So I added a div class of row, put our unordered list and our form into a column of size 9, and then I put the new box inside of a column of size 3. And yeah, this is where our online users are going to appear inside of this div right here. So then in the socket.js file, we went ahead and imported presence. Then we created an empty object called presences. And then down here, we added 2 little channel listeners. We're listening for events for present state, presence diff. If we get state, we want to call this callback, which takes presences, and we sync the state with the presences, and then we pass those presences into display users. And in fact, let me do a console log of presences so you guys can see this. So this will show you the presence map. You're saying I have a syntax error where? Line 25 of what? The JavaScript? Looks fine to me. Whatever. If I do have an error, then it will appear later. It'll certainly cause some issues later. All right, so let me show you guys. So in the editor, when I've joined this chat, we get this object, and let's see, object has quite a lot in it. I guess it's not as easy to look at as I thought it would be. Let me see. Let me grab the other one and sign him into that same room. Let's see if I can. Here we go. So let me copy this over. So this is what the object looks like. It's got user1, and then a bunch of stuff like the Phoenix ref and the user ID, the username, Tensor, and then it's got the other user in it as well. So now on the side here, you can see we have Tensor and Metalman and so on. So as users join this chat room, like for instance, if I leave the chat room, you can see that it immediately shows that happening because of the presence diff part of our code. All right, so let's go back to the editor. 26 of the card. You're saying I have an issue on the card. Oh, card header. Yeah, you're right. And that helps. It centered everything. You can see nice and centered. All right, cool. All right, so back to the JS. So we have present state, present diffs. Present state happens when the user signs into the channel. They get the big old map. Then the diff happens when some event happens in the channel while the user is still in there. So like if a user signs in, then that user will be added to the diff. And in fact, if I console log the presences during the diff, you'll see that it will actually just be one piece of the presences that change. So that's why presences is so powerful, because it really doesn't, it's like Git, for instance, where you don't have to change all of your application when one tiny thing changes. You only change one part of it. And so that's what happens with our data structure. Anyway, I also wrote this display users function, and that's what is creating our HTML. So down here we pass in our presences, and we use a little bit of, I guess, pattern matching, even though JavaScript doesn't really have it. And we're getting the online users by calling presence list, passing in our presences, and then we're going to sort of pattern match here on the ID and then the metas part. And then we're specifically splitting the metas part into the user and then the rest using the spread operator here. And this way we can grab the user, get the user ID and the username, and put it into this HTML. And then we have this little join call, and then the query selector, which is adding this to the HTML. All right, and I believe that's everything. That should get you guys caught up. I'm probably going to, after this stream is done, do some heavy editing on the video so that it will come out to be something decent that people can watch. All right. So now that we have all this, we have the ability to see the users. Let's make it so that we can see whether or not a user is typing. So let's create a variable, and a few variables, in fact. Let's have like a timeout. So after 3 seconds, we'll time out. So the user will type, and then after they stop typing, it'll wait 3 seconds before it changes the presence. So we also want to have a timer, and then we also want to have a user typing boolean, and we'll set this to false by default. And I may be better off putting these inside of this if statement. All right. So what we want to do is go ahead and get the input box. So we've got an ID here called message body. We can go and grab that, and then we can add some listeners to it. So let's go down to our query selector down here and create some query selectors. So document query selector, and what was it called again? It was called message body. That's it. We'll grab that, and we'll create 2 of these, in fact. So let me just copy this over. So for both of these, we want to add event listeners, one for key up. So when the user, actually, let's start with key down. So when the user types, and they push a key down, then we'll execute a callback. And just copy this over. And then we'll have one for key up. So after they release the key, we'll also have another callback. So with the key down, we'll have a function which we'll create called user typing. Let's call it user starts typing so we don't conflict with our variable. And then we'll call clear timeout to clear our typing timer. And then with key up, we want to create call clear timeout, pass in our typing timer, and then we also want to reset the typing timer by calling set timeout, passing in a function which we'll create called user stops typing, and then passing in our timeout. I think we just called it timeout. Yeah. All right. So now when we create these functions, well, let me create the functions first, then I'll explain what's going on. So let's first start with user starts typing. And set this up properly. So user starts typing, we want to check if the user is typing. So if that boolean is true, then we'll just return from this function. And then if it's false, in other words, we haven't returned from the function, we'll turn it to true because the user is pushing down. And we'll use channel push to push the event user typing to our Elixir code. We also want to pass in the boolean true so that we can deal with it in our Elixir. Then with user stop typing, let's see. With user stop typing, we want to call clear timeout on our typing timer. Then we'll say user typing equals false. And then again, we want to call our channel on push on user typing and set the typing data that we're passing through to false. So when the user starts typing, we execute this function which changes the boolean to true. And that's pretty straightforward. When the user stops typing, when they release the key, we call clear timeout to clear the timer, and then we reset the timer so that we can essentially just time 3 seconds. So if the user stops typing for 3 seconds, then we wait for those 3 seconds, and then we execute this callback function. That way we know, okay, so every single time a user types, obviously they push a key down and then they let it go. And so both of these events will always fire on every key that they're typing. And so we need to find out, okay, well, at what point do they stop typing more than 3 seconds? And so that's why it's set up like this. All right. So of course, well, let me go ahead and make it so that this will display next to the user's name inside of our users down here. So we can go ahead and check this. We can create a typing template. Let's make it an empty string, and we'll check to see if the user is typing, because remember, we're passing the typing boolean into our Elixir, so we're going to essentially add it to this user metas field in our presence map. So let's say typing template equals, I'll just create an I structure. We'll have some parentheses, put typing with an ellipses after it, and then we'll just close it like that. And then we just want to add it to our HTML block here after the username. So just typing template like this. That way we see when the user types and when they stop typing. All right, so this is fine on the JavaScript side. Now we need to have a way to handle this event inside of our channel. So this will be another handle in function. This time we're going to be handling user typing, which is the event that we created. And remember, we're getting the typing map with the typing boolean. And of course, we need the socket. So we'll get the user from the socket. And then we're going to do a bit like what we did here with presence track, except we're going to do it with presence update, because we're only diffing the presence in this case. The user's already signed into the channel. We don't need to set up the entire map. We just need to change it, and specifically change the typing field. We'll change it to the typing variable that we're getting through there from the JavaScript. And in fact, let me go ahead and let me first finish this function. So we'll finish it with a reply OK, and then the socket. And then down here with our handle info, when we set up the presence, we want to set up the typing variable, and we'll set it up to be false by default. So when we create our presence, it will automatically have that typing field attached to it. All right. So now we can go ahead and see this. Set up our two browsers. All right, so there's our two browsers. Let's see. Put them both in general. Let me zoom out a bit so that you guys can actually see the page a little bit better. I'll zoom out like that. All right, so on this side, I can start typing. And you can see that it pops up and says typing next to Metalman. And then after 3 seconds, it goes away. And the same goes for Tensor on both sides. So there we go. So that fits in and it works. And yeah, that's the power of presence. So we could add statuses, we could do all kinds of cool things with it. Any kind of metadata that we want to attach to these users, or even to the messages or the chat rooms, we could use presence for. Can we check for 13 enter key after key up? I mean, you could, but there's no specific way to specific reason to do that. You can just use key up instead. I mean, it's pretty basic. It depends on what, I mean, obviously you can use any of the event listeners that are attached to an input box that you want to manipulate your presence. If you're specifically dealing with presence like we're doing here. All right, so the final thing that we want to do is add persistence to our messages. And for this, we're going to need to shut down our server and actually build a bunch of new, well, not a bunch, but a new Ecto schema for the messages. All right, so and we want to associate the Ecto schema with the user and the room so that we know which room the messages are from and which user wrote these messages. So, all right, so in the command line, I'm going to go mix Phoenix gen schema, and we'll call this, we want this to be inside of our talk module, and we'll call it talk message. The schema itself will be messages, and we'll have the room ID, which will reference the room schema. Then we'll have the user ID, which will reference the user's schema. And then we'll have our body, which will be just the message body. All right, so there we go. Before we migrate this, though, we do want to modify the migrations and the schema itself. Let's go and do that. So inside of priv repo migrations, the new migration is here. So we have body, which is a string, then the room ID and the user ID. Both of them are referencing rooms and users. We do want to change the on delete. So both of these we want to set to delete all. That way, if we delete the room that's associated with one of these messages, it will delete all the messages that are associated with that room. And same with the user. So if like a user sends a message and then they get deleted, then all the messages that the user has sent will be deleted in our database. All right, so now we can run mix ecto migrate, and I'm not going to go back to the terminal to show you that I ran this, but I just did. And let's head over to our new schema. Now in here, we want to replace these two with calls to belongs to. So belongs to, the first one will be our room ID. So belongs to room chat app dot, I believe it's talk room, and then belongs to user chat app accounts user, like that. That way we have this actually referencing the two schemas that it's belonging to. Then inside of our room, we want to make sure that it has many messages, and so we can then put in chat app dot accounts dot message, and then inside of let's see, accounts, we want to have has many messages as well. So this will be talk.message, like that. Now this is throwing an error because this should be message, not messages. And see, let me just copy this over. I think the problem is, yes, I put accounts message. It should be talk message. All right, perfect. All right, so both of them have many messages associated with them. Now we can go ahead and manipulate our chat, our talk file, so that we can manipulate the stuff as it's being put into the actual database. So that's alias chat app dot talk dot message, and we'll create a function called create message. So take in the room, the user, and the attributes of the message. And what we want to do is go user, take the user, and we're going to use Ecto build association to build an association between the user, the messages, the room ID, and everything like that. So we're basically building all these associations, and then we're just taking the message and running it through its change set with the attributes so that we can populate it with the body and everything, and then we'll call repo.insert to insert it into our database. All right, so now let's head back to our room channel, and we're going to change some of the stuff in this function because now we have our database to back it. And let's alias our chat app talk.message in here. And what we want to do is, instead of just getting the room ID, we need to get the actual room itself. So let's change this. So get the room, we can just call talk.get room, and I think it's with a bang like that. Let me check. Yeah, get room like this. So we pass in the ID, which we're getting from our assigns map, and then that allows us to get the actual room itself. Of course, we're going to need to alias the chat app.talk module for this to work. Let's see. All right, so room unused, whatever, that's fine. All right, so we get the room and the user. And after that, we can go ahead and have a case statement on talk.create message with the user, room, and pass in the body like that. All right, so it's expecting its clauses, whatever. All right, so we'll have our clauses here. The first one will be okay message. And if we get back okay message, meaning it's fine, then we want to take the message and we want to call repo.preload. We want to preload the user that's associated with the message. Then we'll go message template, or we'll make our message again like we did down here. Let's just copy this up. And yeah, I'm going to call this the message template now that we have the other message up here. So message template will be message.body, and then the username will be message.user.username instead of using the user like we did before. And now we can go ahead and use our broadcast call here. And we're going to broadcast the socket, of course. We're still doing the room ID stuff and the new message. We can get the room ID though by calling message.roomID like this instead. And then we're passing in the message template, not the message in this case. And then we're going to have our reply with OK and sockets. And and now let's deal with an error. If we give an error and then the reason for the error, then we'll just reply with error and socket like that. Okay, so now let's run our application, see if we have any issues. Apparently unused alias for the message. I'm going to leave it here just in case we need it. Let's check out our browser. Let me make sure I have the right browser. All right. We'll leave the chat room and go back in. Say hi. And of course, we do not see anything happening. Now let's see what's going on in the terminal, see what kind of error we've got. All right, so error here says schema accounts user does not have association with messages. Okay, so the problem is with the association. Let me make sure I did that properly. All right, go through this real quick. Some of the errors are here. Maybe I was supposed to write these as messages rather than message. I don't think so though. All right, let's see. So it was user, I think, was the error. So user, we have yes, it needs to be messages, not message. And then room is also messages, not message. Let me make sure I've got room properly set up. Inside of message, it should just be the singular, room and user. And then inside of room, it should be the plural messages, I believe. Yes. Okay. So now let's go back to our browser. All right, so there we go. Finally, our message appears. Let's reload the page, and of course, the message is going to go away, even though it's in our database. And that's because we're not preloading our messages when the user enters the chat room. Instead, what's happening is we're just inserting the messages into our database, but we're not fetching them from the database. So now we need to fetch them from the database. All right, so for that, it's actually fairly straightforward. We want to go ahead and create a function inside of our talk.ex file for getting the messages. And for this, I want to import ecto.query because this will be using an ecto query. We're going to say list messages, room ID will be passed in here, and then the limit for the messages. By default, we'll do 20 messages, and we'll call repo.all. And we want to get from message in message. I'm going to join the user in assoc msg user. Then where msg room ID equals room ID. And these should have commas after them. Order by, we want these to be descending by message.inserted at, and we want to limit them using our limit, and then we want to select specifically the body, which would be our message.body, the user, and that username associated with the user, which would be user.username, like that. All right, so essentially, this is very similar to like an SQL query. So we're stating that we want to fetch data from the message model and then label it as a message. Then we're joining it with the user table, saying Ecto to use the user association between the message and the user. And then we're filtering the messages by the room ID. And notice that we're using the pin operator here because we don't want this to change. And then then we're ordering the messages by descending order. Then we're using limit here so that we can grab the last 20 messages. And then we're specifically grabbing the content that we want. We could, if we wanted to, we could kind of grab this entire thing and put it into a query. I could say query equals like this. Remove the comma there and just put from MSG and user in query like that. And that should be essentially the same thing. All right, so now in our room channel, we want to essentially set up the room so that it receives all of the messages when we go into it, right? So what we can do is go ahead and remove the channel part of this, replace it with messages, and we want to say talk.list messages, pass in the room ID, and yeah, should do it for us. Let's see. Oh yes, and of course now we need to add some stuff to our JavaScript, and we're going to be adding it to the channel join receive OK call. So for this is when you join the channel successfully. We want to make it so that we take the data from our Elixir layer and then we can put it into our JavaScript layer or our HTML layer. So we're going to say response, get the messages, and then we're going to take those messages and reverse them. Then we want to map over them where we get each of the messages, and we're going to call our display message function, this one here, which renders all of our messages on each of our messages, and that way they get displayed like any other message in our chat room. And then we can save it. And then this should make it so that everything works properly. All right. Did I ever run Ecto migrate? I think I did. Let me make sure. I don't think I did, actually. Oh, no, I did. Okay. All right, so let's rerun the server. And I'll show you guys what's going on. I'm not actually seeing any of the messages coming through. So something's going on. All right, so when we join general, we should be seeing messages because I remember I typed some stuff in here. But we're not seeing anything. So you find out what's going on. All right, so they are querying messages. Let me show you guys in the terminal. So query source messages, body username messages, inner join user, blah, 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 blah. And it is running our query, but it's not getting anything back from it, which is strange. Let me see if I can just run a query here. So we'll go chat app repo all from in chat app talk how do I want to do this query? You know what? Hang on. Let me set this up properly. So we import Ecto. We can say room ID equals 1. I think that's our general chat room ID. Let's make a limit of, say, 3. And then we can just say chat app.talk.message. Pipe this into a join inner MSG, comma, this is kind of a complex query, but it's all right. Select grabbing the ID, where, or hang on, grab the user too. Should be like that. Pipe that into where. I probably have a huge typo here, but that's all right. Fix it afterwards if I do. Order by. You know what? I'll skip the order by because I don't really care. Put in our limit. Alright, so this is getting the messages. We've got body test, ID, username, tensor. It did get all the messages. So I'm not sure why it's not rendering them properly. So let's go ahead and go through this yet again once more. Alright, I think the issue is probably in the Elixir layer. Let me go back to the terminal. Well, not the terminal, the editor. Alright, so the issue would be inside of, not the query. The query's fine. The issue is in here, I think. So talk list messages, room ID, socket assign. Yeah, that should be all fine. We're getting our room. All this seems fine. Let me check. All right, let me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to console log some of this stuff. Console log that. See what happens. Alright, so we are getting something. Now apparently type error, it's undefined. It's funny how we have a type error in JavaScript, of all things. Let me just, I'll console log the message part instead of the response message. Oh, I see what's going on. This message piece apparently doesn't exist on the response, even though it should. Let's take a look at the response itself. See what's going on with that. So if I console log the response, it seems that the response itself has messages instead of message. So that's the issue. I put in singular message. Alright, that was pretty stupid of me. But whatever, this actually works, so let's show you guys. So now we've loaded up room 1 and we've got all these tests, and if I say something like hi and then I reload the room, you can see that it now persists all the messages. Finally, all these silly little typos leading to fairly silly mistakes. Let me show you both of the browsers side by side so that we can actually see this happening. So on both browsers, we should now have all of the messages. So even if I type in from another user, now that's in there, and we can say, we can like simulate a conversation, and then if we reload these pages, you can see that the messages persist. And even if we exit, come back, they load up pretty quickly. Alright, finally finished, and actually have the app working as I want it to. That's a relief after last night. Alright guys, do you have any questions before I close off this stream? Go ahead and ask them. They don't have to be on this particular topic. If you don't want to ask a question on this topic, you can ask a question on whatever you want. Or anything that I have the ability to answer a question on. Will the messages be tied to each room? Yes, absolutely. We did that via using the room ID. So if we go ahead and we take one of the users and move him to, say, Elixir, start typing stuff in. So like hi, and just a bunch of stuff. I'm going to just put a bunch of gobbledygook in here. I'll move over to Elixir, and you can see that it now loads that stuff. And in fact, if I go ahead and let's delete this room. So I'll delete the room, and we'll create it again. So Elixir. Now, if we go back into Elixir, I don't know why it's getting an error all of a sudden, but it should be all right. I guess it's not letting me enter with this particular user. I'll have to look in to see what this actually is about. Anyway, oh, it seems to be that this user is trying to query Elixir as room 3. Yeah. All right. So now, because we deleted Elixir, now all those messages should be removed from our database. And in fact, of course, there is no room ID 2 anymore, and now Elixir is room ID 3. And again, any messages I put in here are going to be attached to this specific room ID. So if we come in here, you know, these messages will persist. And of course, no matter how many rooms I add, all of them will be independent of one another. And that's one of the nice things about Phoenix is if we were to add, say, like 1,000 different rooms and we had like hundreds of people using them at any given moment, we could just expand our processes, make it so that we have multiple room processes and multiple channel processes in the same Phoenix app, and it would then expand to accommodate all that stuff, which is kind of cool. And yeah, even if we had some kind of database errors, we could also expand them as well. Add some more processes to handle the Ecto controllers. Does anybody else have any other questions before I sign out? Let me see. There are only 4 concurrent viewers, so I'm not surprised. So, just to let you guys know, once this is finished, this stream is finished, I'll probably go through and edit the stream itself because of that one blunder in the middle. But yeah, I'm not going to redo the stream again like I did last night. So in the next stream, we'll probably do something like Go WebAssembly. Maybe we'll do something with Phoenix in a few weeks. But yeah, don't worry, Joannas. You can check out the video after I post it. So it will be up there. You'll be able to go through the code as well. I'm going to commit all this to GitHub in a moment here. And then, yeah, you'll be able to read through the code. In fact, I'll commit it right now as I'm talking to you guys. So, yeah, I mean, Phoenix is actually a fairly simple a web framework. A lot of people get intimidated because of the whole pattern matching thing, and because Elixir is a bit foreign compared to like Ruby or Java or any other object-oriented programming languages. But honestly, once you get into Phoenix, once you get into Elixir, it's actually easier to use it than to use like Rails or something like that. Well, that's nice, Darion. I'm not sure if it was better than the book because of the blunders I made, but I think it came out better than last night at the very least. So that's a win in my book. All right, guys. Well, I need to actually run because I've got stuff I need to do today. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, we'll have more stuff coming next week. I've got a lot more time than I did this past week, and yeah, don't have any random health issues like I have had in the past few weeks. So everything should be all right. And yeah, I should resume doing the introduction to Elixir series and the introduction to Flutter series. And I'm going to be adding a bunch of new stuff rather quickly. I hope you guys enjoy it too. Some stuff I haven't revealed yet. So, all right, guys. Well, I hope you guys have a good evening or a good morning wherever you are. And yeah, I hope to see you guys next time.